They lurk in deep forests and dark tombs, damp caves and forsaken ruins, sunken sewers and abandoned homes. Waiting where men fear to tread, they strike out of hunger or sheer malice. But what happens when creatures from beyond known reality leave their abode to stalk and kill? These are the terrifying instances of monster attacks. Located on the Kenai Peninsula of Alaska, the town of Portlock has a sinister reputation predating colonial times. Spanish explorers in the 18th century reported the area seemed to exude a sense of dread, with many succumbing to a strange sickness and strange cries heard echoing from the mountains at night. In 1785, British Captain Nathaniel Portlock arrived to survey the area with his men, discovering that an Aboriginal settlement had been mysteriously abandoned, even though the region had plentiful fish and game. As the years passed, so-called cannibal giants were said to conduct nightly raids on settlers, leading to rumors that the wilderness here was cursed. As the 20th century dawned, modern industry arrived in Portlock with a salmon cannery and basic infrastructure that allowed the town to initially thrive. It was around this time sightings of a towering figure stalking the perimeter of the town occurred, reportedly responsible for destroying fishing wheels and throwing heavy boulders at work crews. One resident allegedly confronted the attacker with his rifle at the ready, only for it to withdraw without a shot being fired. Oral history among the local tribes spoke of the Nantinak, or Hairy Man, a malicious creature of spiritual origin akin to the Bigfoot. By the 1920s, a curfew had been established, and armed guards patrolled the cannery and school after sundown. No one was permitted to enter the woods or fog alone. It was in 1931 that the first fatality took place. Having ventured into the forest by himself, a lumberjack named Andrew Kamluck was found dead, his head having been devastated by a single blow from a piece of extremely heavy equipment. Hunters also found colossal 18-inch footprints that vanished into rocky terrain near the scene as well. This would prove to be only the first of several gruesome deaths and disappearances that took place over the ensuing decade, with bodies or body parts sometimes washing ashore displaying bite and claw marks. By 1950, changing infrastructure and economic woes forced the last residents of Portlock to relocate, but the tales persisted that they had fled in fear. A goat hunter reported being chased by a creature in 1968. Hunters claimed to have heard something bipedal circling their tent while growling during a storm in 1973. And a paramedic attending an elderly man in 1990 said his patient was agitated, asking if he had seen something he only referred to as it. In modern times, Portlock stands as a ghost town with buildings left to rot and machines collecting rust. Nanwelek holds private ownership, with plans for redevelopment having never materialized. Often dismissed as tall tales, generational retellings and local folklore insist that something malevolent watches over the wilderness surrounding the village. The Martin family moved to Palmyra, Maine in 2006 after the father, Eric, suffered a back injury that prevented him from working, along with wife, Shelley, and teen daughter, Chelsea. Their grown son, Sean, helped by moving and securing the family's firearms in an outdoor shed. The farmhouse they now lived in was a densely wooded rural area that seemed peaceful and idyllic. As time moved on, however, their new home would prove to be a trap. Rather than suddenly being thrust into danger, things began to escalate slowly for the Martins. At first, birds and insects would abruptly fall silent in the woods, accompanied by strange lights at night beyond the tree line that seemed to extinguish when approached. Eric and Sean once tried to investigate these, but were overcome by a sudden, intense feeling of fear. While walking dogs in the woods, Chelsea and her boyfriend discovered a large mound measuring roughly 5 by 10 feet. The dogs became agitated, and the couple decided to turn back when they heard growling. Animal tracks they noticed around the property seemed to be canine, although were too large to belong to any local wildlife. Most chilling of all, Eric sighted the ghost of a preteen girl wearing old-fashioned lace boots and braids in the house and loft on several occasions. It was one summer night when Eric and Shelley were relaxing on the porch of their home when a hush settled over the woods. Sensing danger, Eric took Shelley inside, where she retrieved a flashlight. Shining the light on the trees, the couple saw the reflective eyes of several wolf-like creatures that stood upright on canine legs. Counting 5 in all, they were approximately 7 feet tall, covered in various shades of short brown fur, had pointed ears extending upward from the jawline, and tails under a foot long. The creatures rapidly closed in on the house, causing the Martins to quickly lock all doors and windows. Encircling the home, the pack growled and stalked the exterior, with one looking directly at Shelley through a window as it stood upright. Though Chelsea had been sleeping upstairs, she was now huddled with other family members and pets in a bedroom as they gathered whatever makeshift weapons they could find. Eric had tried to reach the guns stored outside, but was forced back when the attackers lunged at him, having been partially deterred by a security light. The terrified family could only listen throughout the night as a pack outside scratched at the walls and climbed onto the roof, attempting to gain entry into the farmhouse while displaying an eerie level of intelligence. At sunrise, the beasts withdrew from their siege and returned to the woods. Marks left by hooked claws were found along the walls and doors, along with bipedal footprints in the mud. Having been traumatized by the incident, Eric Martin and his family had to break the lease on their home and move away. Often explained by fear-induced hysteria, the Palmyra Wolves incident is commonly attributed to misidentified wildlife. Those familiar with the study of the paranormal will find the account matches the description of the Dogman cryptid. The case only received limited local news coverage, and although no official scientific evidence exists, the Martin family's experience bears striking similarities to other Dogman encounters, even if none match this level of sheer pack relentlessness. It was a vein of gold quartz that had attracted miners to the rugged wilderness near Mount St. Helens in Washington state during the July of 1924. The men, Fred Beck, Marion Smith, Leroy Smith, Gabe Lefebvre, and John Peterson, arrived and built a small wooden cabin to serve as their base camp. This would be their only protection from what was to come. While working on the claim, they started to notice things would foreshadow a violent encounter. Footprints similar to a human's, but far too large, were found near their water source, while strange sounds echoed from the trees, accompanied by the feeling of being watched. The miners had been working there only a few days before Fred Beck noticed a bipedal ape-like creature moving through the trees as he was prospecting alone on a ridge. Panicking, he fired at the figure with his rifle, which caused it to retreat into the brush and escalate an already tense situation. The tear would truly begin on July 16, 1924, as the miners were gathered inside their cabin. The sound of rocks being thrown against the walls outside sounded all around them, soon accompanied by massive boulders weighing over 40 pounds that impacted with enough force to shake the structure and crack the timber. Caught off guard, the men grabbed their firearms and began to fire into the darkness through the gaps in the walls as heavy footsteps thumped around the perimeter and more of the creatures climbed onto the roof. It was from there one of the rocks fell and knocked Fred Beck unconscious, with another close call having one of the attackers reach through a gap to seize a mining axe that the men managed to wrestle back. Trapped inside, the workers spent the night terrified that the creatures would manage to breach the walls and overwhelm them. It was not until the first rays of dawn appeared on the horizon that the attack ceased, leaving the area outside strewn with boulders and enormous footprints. Having recovered, Fred fired at one of the creatures still standing on the edge of the canyon and sent it tumbling into the gorge. Desperate for an escape, he and his crew quickly packed whatever they could carry and fled the cabin, abandoning their lucrative gold claim. Local and national media sensationalized the story, dubbing the mysterious hominids mountain devils. Although most of the men were too traumatized by the experience to ever speak of it, Fred later proposed that the things were not native to the wilderness, but in fact extra-dimensional beings. Those doubting the veracity of what happened suspected it was merely a result of local youths from a YMCA camp rolling boulders down the steep canyon walls, or even mass hysteria brought on by a landslide. The canyon itself now bears the name resulting from the event, with the cabin's foundation and some artifacts later discovered by researchers. The Ape Canyon incident would be eerily similar to an encounter in Honobia, Oklahoma, that took place around the turn of the millennium. Brothers Tim and Mike Humphreys were living in a rural cabin with their wives and children, where strange howls were heard from the woods. Although odd creatures had been glimpsed before, bipedal figures reeking of urine and burnt hair began to visit the property nightly to steal the meat from their hunting kills, throw stones at the home, and attempt to gain entry by banging on the windows and jiggle the doorknobs. The women and children left for safety, leaving Tim and Mike to defend against the hairy attackers. Tim claimed to have shot one of the creatures, causing the others to carry the wounded individual into the woods. As with the Ape Canyon incident, the siege at Honobia did not produce any definitive biological specimens, leading many to write it off as another case of wild animal attacks, although the area continues to produce reports of paranormal sightings. The year was 1764 in south-central France, the province of Gévaudan. A largely rural, heavily forested and mountainous area, the people here often tended to livestock for a living. Their peaceful existence would be interrupted by something unexplained during the early summer of that year. A young woman tending cattle in the Mercure forest was attacked by a creature, becoming the first reported witness, although the bulls drove it off before it could kill. The next encounter would not be as fortunate, as a 14-year-old shepherdess, Jeanne Boulette, was brutally killed near Les Hubacs on June 30th, with subsequent attacks leaving victims with their throats torn out and their bodies partially consumed. Clearly, something predatory was stalking the area. Descriptions of what became known as the Beast of Gévaudan describe it as a quadrupedal, with features similar to a wolf, but with distinct qualities of its own. Covered with red fur It had a black stripe down its back and a tail it could supposedly use as a whip that ended in a tuft of hair. Its head was elongated atop a body the size of a small donkey, with sharp fangs and red eyes that sometimes glowed. Able to leap long distances, the beast could walk on its hind legs and moved with unnatural agility, emitting a foul smell. Over the next 2 years, attacks from the monster occurred on a sometimes daily basis, eventually drawing the attention of King Louis XV himself. Occasionally, victims were able to fend off the beast, such as a group of children armed with sticks and pikes, or the Maid of Gévaudan, Marie Jeanne Velay, who fought it off with a staff after it attacked her and her sister near a stream. The Beast of Gévaudan proved to be unusually bold, attacking in broad daylight and near houses. With a bounty on its head, numerous attempts were made to capture or kill the beast, both large-scale hunts using dragoons and stealth tactics with bloodhounds proved fruitless, with the king's gun-bearer and lieutenant of the hunt, Francois Antoine, finally slaying a huge grey wolf with his team near the Abbey of Chesnay in late September 1765. The Wolf of Chazé was stuffed and presented at Versailles, with the Beast of Gévaudan declared dead and Francois richly rewarded. Yet the killings continued for the next 2 years, indicating there was more than one culprit or that the hunters had not killed the correct target. It would not be until June 19, 1767, that a hunt organized by Marquis d'Apicher near Montmouchet encountered a large canid. Jean Chastel, an aged farmer and innkeeper, shot the creature, allowing an examination of its stomach contents that revealed human remains. The poorly preserved carcass was taken to Paris, where it was unceremoniously buried after minor study. The attacks finally relented afterward. The true nature of the Beast of Gévaudan remains a mystery. Generally, it is believed the killings were the work of a particularly large and aggressive pack of wolves, although other theories state it was an exotic animal that escaped from a menagerie, if not some kind of hybrid. More fantastical ideas cast the monster as a serial killer wearing animal hides, a cryptid, or even a werewolf. Regardless, the 18th century attacks became one of the first known international media sensations, leaving anywhere from 80 to over 120 people dead. Fear of what lurks in the dark is hardwired into human genetics. From ancient tales of monsters preying on villages, to modern urban legends about what awaits in abandoned buildings, these stories may contain an element of truth. If attacked, you can try hiding under the bed, unless, of course, that is where the monster came from in the first place.